Greetings viewers, and welcome to Microsoft Windows XP. Some of you might be wondering why I'm demonstrating Windows XP when Windows 7, Windows 8, and multiple server versions are also released at this point in time. The answer to that is that the features and techniques, including hotkeys and shortcuts I will be demonstrating, have existed since Windows 3.1, and a number of them are still in existence in the current operating systems, although they don't work all the time and they don't work in all places. But occasionally some of them are still useful. For instance, if a window opens off screen, or if, let's say, the graphical interface designer left out a feature or put something in a hard to reach place, you might still be able to reach it with a keyboard even when you are unable to click on it. So obviously the stuff I have on the screen at the moment is not what you would generally have when you start Windows XP. But as an introduction, we're going to start with what you generally have when you work with a computer. That is a mouse, something that has at least two buttons on it, a left click for the primary and a right click. If you are left-handed, you can switch these buttons in the control panel, although for consistency, some people who are left-handed leave these as they are and just use the mouse on the left hand, in which case generally their left hand middle finger becomes the primary click and their index finger is the secondary. Putting that aside, given that the mouse is what is pictured, the arrow or the pointer or the graphical user interface designator controlled by a pointing device is what you see on the screen. That said, it's still fair to call it a mouse, and plenty of documentation still refers to it that way. It is the object controlled by the mouse, therefore the mouse pointer. The other major input device you will generally use is a keyboard, what is commonly a two-dimensional array of dual-state inputs, commonly called keys or buttons. On the keyboard you have a number of letter keys that are common. I'll go ahead and mouse over those. Common letter keys, top of the keyboard number keys. Above that there are the function keys marked with F, at least on the English versions. On the right side you have a number pad, and you might notice that the numbers generally only push numbers when number lock is on. We'll get back to that later. There are some arrow keys, generally used for moving a cursor around. Again, there's no cursor on the screen at the moment, we'll get back to that. Of interest for our lesson today, though, there are modifier keys on the left and right sides of the general pad, and these include Shift, Control, Alt, and the Windows key. The Windows key is sometimes not considered a modifier, but it is useful for keyboard shortcuts, and some programs check the status of the Windows key separately. Also of interest are the keyboard lock lights, those being number lock, caps lock, and scroll lock. And in general, their key positions are here: number lock, caps lock, and scroll lock. And the keyboard lock lights are not on the on-the-screen keyboard, but you can play with those on your own. If you do not have a keyboard and pointing device, you probably aren't running XP on the device you're looking at, or you don't need them at the moment. The techniques in this video should work with equivalent equipment as needed. Now that we've gone through what we have, let's get on to using what's here. The background of the workspace for the computer in Windows XP and similar versions of Windows is called the desktop. It has icons such as the recycle bin here that you can click, generally being the left click, and drag around and move them. And if you press the secondary or right click on the object, you get options for that object. You can also right click the desktop to get options for the desktop, such as how to arrange the icons, refreshing the list of objects on the desktop to see if it's changed, making a new object on the desktop, and a full properties page. The trick here is that this is not just for the desktop, but it represents the display that you are viewing the desktop with, so display properties. There are tabs in here, and we'll get back to this, but the point for now is that right-clicking on something generally gives you a context menu or another option or another action for the object you've clicked. Now let's move on to something a little more fun and a little more useful. If somebody says start a program, or you need to start a program, how do you go about that? A hint in what I've said is start. There's a start menu down here, nice and labeled. And it says click here to begin if you read the tooltip on it. And from here, let's say your task is to start Notepad. Okay, so the newbie mouser way, newbie being a person who is inexperienced in this, does not see it on the list. There's all programs, and then your new person goes through checking each of the options until they find Notepad. And with a click of Notepad, they are successful in having Notepad on the screen, except that it goes off the screen. We'll get back to that later. Okay, so that is a way to start a program, and having done it once, a mouser, notice the extensive use of the mouse at this point. We'll go back to start, and notice that XP has added it to the recent programs. That's nice, but let's assume it's not there. All programs, accessories, Notepad. Not bad. You can get there fast, or at least faster, because you've done it before. The keyboard way of doing this, for a person who knows where Notepad is, can use the arrow keys on the start menu to get to Notepad. And again, assuming it's not there, get to start menu, you have programs, and you'll notice at this point all programs has underlined the P in programs. What this means is that pressing P will let you select that object, and it didn't automatically expand. The reason for that is printers also starts with P, and pressing P selects it. So you might guess that Enter will open all programs. That works. You can go to Accessories with the A key, and Notepad with N. Notepad then starts. That works. There is also the Runbox way. If you know the program name of Notepad, you can go to Start and Run and type Notepad and hit Enter, and that works. If you know the extension, which is sometimes required, you can do notepad.exe, and Notepad also runs. Those are also valid. There is another method for opening Notepad, still without using command line, which at this point some people are probably expecting if I'm going that direction. You can go to the Start menu, find the Notepad shortcut, right-click it to get to its properties, and you can set a shortcut key, such as Control-Alt-1. And it's just an example I had. I actually pressed Alt-1, but Windows doesn't like just that short of a key being reserved by itself, so it added Control to that. So Control and Alt and 1. I hit Apply, hit OK, close Notepad, and now if I press Control-Alt-1, Notepad starts. That works, but it requires preparation in that you had to adjust a shortcut or a start menu object to configure that hotkey. That is valid, but it's kind of a cheater way. It works for you because you've set it up. It might not work on a shared office computer, and if you're using a shared profile, for instance, where you share the same logon name instead of having your own unique name, the keys you set will affect other users. So if there's a program somebody uses that has Control-Alt-1 or whatever you pick already in use, then there's a good chance that when somebody presses Control-Alt-1, whatever the hotkey is for that program, they get Notepad in addition to or instead of what they wanted to accomplish. So far I've been using the mouse for the instructions, and the mouse is an OK interface instrument, and I've known people to get around computers almost exclusively with the mouse, using the keyboard only when they need to type. That's okay, but I'm going to show more features and more options. So here we have a Notepad window. Like any basic window object in the Windows environment, it has some interface elements that are somewhat standard. In the top right, you have 3 buttons, generally meant to be used with the mouse. The far right one is close, then the middle one is maximize, and the left one is minimize. Closing it is obvious, it destroys the window generally. Maximize makes it cover the full screen or the full grid if you have grids set up via your graphics options. Minimize sends it down to the taskbar. At this point I'll point out the Start button is on the edge of the taskbar. The taskbar shows programs that are running and goes from that edge to this separator. This is the system tray where icons are kept from background programs and helper utilities like the volume control and the system tray clock. If you click on a running program, it should come back, which is called restore, to restore it to its visible state. You'll also notice if you have something maximized, the option says restore down. So this implies a restore is when it is not minimized or not maximized. Also on the window we have the menu bar, the title bar, and the system menu. The system menu isn't obviously visible, but if you click the application's icon for a running window, you get the system or the application menu for it. A number of programs also have that implemented, so if you right-click the title bar, you get the same menu. It might be useful to get that menu again by right-clicking the object's entry in the taskbar. When you have a menu like this but you don't want to use it, you can escape it by pressing the Escape or ESC key on the keyboard, by pressing Alt, or by clicking somewhere else. That same menu technique should generally be true of the application's menu bar when you have a menu open. You also notice that while using a program, if you accidentally press the Alt key, the menu bar highlights. That is actually useful in case you wanted to get to a menu using the keyboard. You'll notice when I press the Alt key, File gets an underlined F, Edit gets an underlined E, Format gets the O underlined, in this case because File already has the F. View gets the underlined V, and H is underlined for help. So if I wanted to get to a feature quickly, I can go Alt F for File, and I am presented with a File menu. So if I had something already written here, I can go to File New via Alt Fn and get the prompt to get a new file and discard the changes very quickly. The same is true for File and Open. You'll also notice that control shortcuts are posted in this menu as well. For something like Save As, in this version of Notepad there's no hotkey defined for use outside of the File menu. So to get here quickly, with the underlines visible, you can see A is underlined for Save As. So Alt F-A would get me to the Save As menu. And from here we can cancel out, as there's nothing worth saving in this notepad. Some other interface things to note are that the mouse arrow changes when you position it over the edges of a window. You can see it changes to the size handle or size handle pointers there, where you can adjust a single edge or the corners and resize the window as desired. Some windows have a minimum size specified to them, so if you try to shrink the window below a certain point, you can only shrink so far. This version of Notepad seems to only keep a small section of the title bar and the title bar buttons visible. You might also notice that in the application's system menu, there are options for move, size, minimize, and maximize here that you can get to by dragging the edges or clicking and dragging the application's title bar. or by pressing the other buttons on the title menu. So it might not be immediately obvious why these items are in this menu or what purpose they serve here. For the keyboard users, this is of interest. By pressing Alt-Space, you can get to the system menu and have access to these functions by their underlined letters, or by the mouse at this point. But if you're doing this all by keyboard, Alt-Space followed by M would select the move option, and Alt-Space followed by X would maximize the window. To demonstrate that really quick, I will maximize the window. You'll also notice from a maximized point, the other options regarding move and size are not available because the window is maximized. It can't move at this point. It takes the full size of the screen. And maximize is unavailable because it is maximized. Restore is available, and the icon for this is two overlapping windows, implying that by restoring the window, you can have another window visible next to this version of Notepad, or this instance. The keyboard versions of move and size work a little bit differently. If we go Alt-Space for M to move the window, the mouse arrow changes to the all directions pointer. And you can see I'm moving the mouse, but the window is not moving with it. By pressing any of the arrow keys on the keyboard, the window is now bound to the mouse. So moving the mouse moves the window. Also at this point, moving the arrow keys moves the window. But you can see the window moves by chunks. So it's not a smooth move, but it does move a distance. To move the window by 1 pixel at a time, or 1 unit of the screen, hold Control and press the arrow key, and the window moves by 1 pixel width or 1 pixel height at a time. This will allow you to move windows more precisely, and by doing basically the same thing with the size option, you can size windows precisely. So if I were to go Alt-Space S, and then I pick the border of the window I want to adjust. So I press the right arrow key, and now for the movement of further presses of the keyboard, move the window borders. And it's also bound to the mouse at this point, so if I move the mouse, that same window edge is bound to the mouse arrow. From this point, I can also go up or down to, let's say, grab the top edge of the window, move the top and right. At this point, the cursor, or the mouse pointer, has changed to the top right sizer to also confirm which corner I am adjusting. Some users might also notice this is the same pointer as the bottom left. So basically it is confirming it is adjusting a corner, but it is not a positive identification of which corner. The same thing also applies to edge adjustments about the control modifier. If I hold Control while using the arrow key, I get 1 pixel adjustment per press. At this point, somebody out there is bound to be wondering, what good does advanced management or precision management of windows get you, aside from the ability to be obsessive compulsive about your window positioning? I will say that there is a use to this, and I will set up an example shortly. For the purposes of this example, I have set up this address book instance as being off screen. For those of you looking just at the desktop, you may ask, what address book? Down here you can see there is an address book entry in the taskbar, and if I click on it, it appears selected, but it is not visible. If I right-click on it and say maximize, the object is visible, but hitting restore restores it off screen. Well, some people might say this is an improper example and it shouldn't happen. You may be correct. Perhaps it should not happen. While working with additional monitors, or undocking a laptop from a docking station where a different monitor or additional monitors were available, the system may lose windows off the screen, or off the visible workspace area. So to recover this, we can select the window via the mouse down here, press Alt-Space, M, and bind it to the keyboard, and then move the mouse, and it will retrieve the window. Another method of selecting windows that I've not shown before is the Alt tab. Another method of selecting windows that I've not shown before is the Alt-Tab shortcut. When multiple windows are available, Alt-Tab shows you a list of the windows by their icons, and below them their title is displayed. If many windows are open, it may be of interest to switch windows using Alt-Tab and Alt-Shift-Tab. Alt-Shift-Tab goes backwards. That is also true for many other selection options in Windows. Adding Shift may make the selection run backwards. So if from my pictures I want to go directly to the Notepad window, I can hold Alt and press Tab, and hit Tab again until the untitled Notepad window is selected, and then release Alt. That pulls Notepad to the front. Other window switching options include Alt-Escape, which takes the current active window and puts it on the bottom of the stack. And again, Shift reverses that. It will take the bottommost window and pull it to the front of the stack if I do Alt-Shift-Escape. That makes that hotkey undoable. While we are covering window management hotkeys, I will cover two that are of interest for security reasons. One is the Windows key and D, as in Delta. Pressing Windows and D shows the desktop by minimizing all windows. It may be of interest to note that some windows cannot be minimized as they use the Always on Top flag, or their window class does not allow them to be minimized. They may disappear when you press Windows D, but they may reappear as soon as you click anything or open another window. If you press Windows D again without interacting much with the desktop, it will restore those windows. A similar feature is also on the right-click option of the taskbar, where it says Show Desktop, and to show open windows. The other hotkey of interest for security reasons is Windows L. By pressing Windows and L, the screen is locked. You are shown the logon screen or the welcome page in Windows. I will do this from the on-screen keyboard for our purposes here. In this case, the name account doesn't have a password, so when I click on it, we are returned to the desktop. As I mentioned before, there is the Close button to close a window. There is commonly a File Exit or a File Close option. From the System menu on a program, you'll see Close is tagged with Alt F4. Alt F4 is the common shortcut known to close a window. However, Control W is also known to work at times, and Alt space C works by triggering the System menu followed by C for Close. Another method to close a window that commonly works is to double-click the application's icon in the top left corner. It is also implied by this point that you can right-click a Windows title bar and press C to get to the same close option as Alt space C. I said we would get back to the desktop properties, so here we are with display properties. This is a tabbed dialog box interface, in contrast to a normal window such as Notepad. In Notepad you have a menu bar. In a dialog box, you generally do not have a menu bar. It is uncommon for a true dialog box to allow you to minimize, maximize it, or resize it. You might also have a context help icon. However, in many common programs, the help entries to work with this feature have not been filled out. So when it works properly, you can press context help and then select an object on the dialog box, and it will explain something about that object. The way a dialog box normally works is it will present you with some options. In this case, options on multiple tabs, so you can click a tab to display different options. And the options take effect when you press Apply or OK at the bottom of the screen. In this case, I will change the background and press Apply. The difference between Apply and OK, when properly coded, is that Apply makes the settings take effect but does not close the window. The OK button applies the settings and closes the window, and the Cancel button discards the changes In other words, they do not take effect, and the window is also closed. In some programs, the cancel button may simply undo the changes, or there may be a separate revert button that undoes the changes but does not close the window. For purposes of hotkey navigation, the tab key flips through the items that you can get to on the dialog box. You can see the tab order is from the background selection to the browse button, to the position selector, to the color selector, to the customize desktop button, to the OK button, to the cancel button, to the desktop tab selector, and back to the background selection. Going backwards through this order is accomplished with Shift Tab, at which point I am on the desktop selector again, and the cycle runs in reverse. While the desktop selector tab is selected, which is noted by the dotted box around the object, I can use the left and right arrow keys to change tabs. Another option to change tabs while something else is selected is to use Control Tab and Control Shift Tab. If you go backwards when you're on the left edge, or forward on the right edge, the tabs loop, allowing you to repeat the options or go from the far left option to the far right option while skipping all of the tabs in between. Other people and companies have produced lists of keys and hotkeys that work within Windows and other programs. Some of the keys that are commonly known to work in Windows are F1 for help, F2 to rename a file, F3 for some form of search, F5 to refresh. F10 is a little odd in that it works like the Alt key to select the menu bar. Other hotkeys work for different purposes, but many times they depend on what program they are used in. Some features that commonly work in text programs are the copy, cut, delete, and paste commands. So if there is text in a text box, this text can be selected via Notepad's context menu for Select All. You'll also notice under the Edit menu that there's the Select All hotkey of Control A. So by pressing Control A, all of the text is highlighted with the same effectiveness as right-clicking and pressing Select All. Other options that are now present in the context menu are Cut, Copy, and Delete. Delete has the obvious correspondence to the Delete key on the keyboard, so I can press Delete here. Actually, I will copy this first so I have the text available. By pressing copy, the text has been copied to the Windows clipboard, which is where text and some other objects can be kept for a period of time. Generally, only one object can be kept on the clipboard at a time, so by copying different text, the first text is no longer stored. By doing so, paste is now available, in which case text would be inserted from the Windows clipboard. So I can now press Delete here. I can press Paste to write the text back from the Windows clipboard. And I can then select All and press the Delete key on the keyboard to wipe the text just as effectively. From Edit, you may notice the other common text hotkeys are also labeled, where Cut is Control X, Copy is Control C, Paste is Control V in Windows, and Delete corresponds to the Delete key. A common question is why Control P is not Paste. I believe that has to do with keeping these three options all near each other, available by the left hand for right-handed mouse users. Print has the hotkey Control P under the File menu. In my experience, Cut, Copy, and Paste are not used rapidly and frequently along with the print function.